Good afternoon. Given that today is 9/11, I'd just like to ask for a moment of silence in recognition of this unfortunate event. Thank you. Welcome to the 2019 annual business meeting of Vizo Financial Corporate Credit Union. We want to remind everyone that only authorized representatives of our member credit unions may address the meeting. To properly record the minutes of this meeting, we will need you to identify yourself and the member credit union you represent prior to addressing the meeting. I'd like to introduce the board of directors. Myself, James McCall, Veriva Community Credit Union, Chairman. Scott Woods, Vice Chair, South Carolina Federal Credit Union. Joan Moran, Treasurer, Department of Labor Federal Credit Union. Scott Weaver, Secretary, Carolina Foothills Federal Credit Union. Bob Bruns, Director, Charlotte Metro Federal Credit Union. Jeff Chelios, Director, Riverfront Federal Credit Union. Allison DeTong, Director, University of Virginia Community Credit Union. Jerry King, Director, Dexday Federal Credit Union. And Brian J. Vidic, Director, Destinations Credit Union. Our supervisory committee members are Richard C. Burnett, Chair, Belco Community Credit Union. Michael Parker, Member, Secured Advantage Federal Credit Union. And Mark Volponi, USX Federal Credit Union. Vizo Financial's credit committee members are Jerry King, Chair, Dexday Federal Credit Union. Dan Berry, Member, Duke University Federal Credit Union. And Kimberly Witt, Member, MTC Federal Credit Union. There are quite a few corporate staff here today. I'd ask those that are here to please stand and be recognized. Thank you. I'd like to appoint Scott Weaver as the recording secretary for the 2019 annual meeting. I will now call upon our secretary, Scott Weaver, to determine whether we have a quorum.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We do have a quorum present.
Thanks, Scott. Heck of a job. He can count to 12. The minutes of the Vizo Financial Corporate Credit Union annual meeting, which was held on August 9, 2018, were provided prior to the meeting's commencement. I'd like to call for any corrections, additions, and/or deletions at this time. Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the August 9, 2018 annual meeting of Vizo Financial Corporate Credit Union? Please remember to state your name and the credit union you represent.
So moved, Jim McDaniel, Harris, Dressler.
Thank you, Jim. Second? Allison DeTong. Thank you, Allison. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. We'll move on to the officers' reports, and I'll provide the chairman's report first. This year's annual report was once again provided in electronic format, and as a link to the report was provided to all registered attendees. It's also available on the Vizo Financial website. The official written chairman executive's report appears in the 2018 annual report. However, I do wish to make a few brief comments today. This October represents 3 years since First Carolina and Mid-Atlantic Corporate voluntarily agreed to merge and form Vizo Financial. While management has worked diligently to consolidate operations and restructure the organization for the future, the board has focused on plotting out a long-term vision for the organization. Much of this vision has focused on leveraging the full potential of the corporate cooperative model and clearly aligning all that we do with Vizo Financial's core values. The merger has yielded clear results in building a much stronger financial base and broadened the level of expertise we can provide members in terms of both personnel and products. Original members of Mid-Atlantic Corporate, such as my credit union, have clearly benefited from the improved investment returns on deposited funds, whereas those from First Carolina now have access to a plethora of payment and risk management services at extremely attractive price levels. Looking toward the future to achieve the greatest value for our collective membership, we talk about these recurring themes: trust, aligning products with member needs, and deepening member relationships. Vizo Financial's success and the value we provide is proportionate to the level of member collaboration and product usage. To achieve this greater level of participation and maximize the benefits of the corporate credit union model, we want to be more tuned into our member needs by working closer together in selecting future innovations and products for development. To accomplish this task, we will make our staff more accessible to our membership in terms of providing support and advisory services. We want to create more opportunities to interact with our members to better understand your specific needs. The Board of Directors, management, and staff of Vizo Financial care deeply about what we do each and every day for our members. We want to clearly demonstrate a high level of service predicated on a deeply engaged partnership with our members. The message I would like to leave with you today is that the primary motivation for consolidating organizations was to create a more financially sound and vibrant corporate for our members. And we are well on our way to realizing these goals. Thanks to you for your ongoing support. We are a much stronger organization today and better positioned to take on the challenges ahead. Every step along the way has been focused on strategically creating a corporate that can do more for its members. We have complete confidence in our leadership team that they will make the right decisions for the right reasons, always keeping benefit to the membership as our top priority. In closing, it has been my pleasure to serve as your corporate chairman over the past year. It's an honor to represent all of you and to work alongside this board and management team to lead this organization into the future. I want to thank my fellow board members for this opportunity, and thank you, our members, for your continued support. This concludes my report. The reports of the Treasurer, the Credit Committee, and Supervisory Committee were printed in the annual report. Unless there are questions on those reports, we will accept those as presented and move on. I'll now call on Jay Murray, CEO, and Dave Brehmer, President, to provide the executive report.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome, everyone. We've tried to streamline this year's annual meeting. Originally, it was to finish early, and Jay and I, after we talked, it was just to elongate our presentation. So, anyway, I am going to do a very quick update on where we are financially. We're doing extremely well. Touch upon where we are kind of currently as an organization, what we're working on, and then turn it over to Jay to talk about kind of the future direction of the company. As we always start, our vision here, as Jim had mentioned, we are all about our members' engaged partnerships and trying to be experts in fields that help our members succeed. What really the value you hold in your ownership and what you do with Vizo Financial is the people that you work with. We want to look at ourselves and have you think of us as extensions of your own staff. Our core values, I always like to start out with our core values to make sure that everyone knows this is what everyone on our team is living up to on a day-to-day basis, and we take this very seriously in everything we do. In terms of financially, these are hot off the press, so it's as of August 31st. I will say we budgeted for 2 rate increases. It's moving the other way. Unfortunately, because that does have some impact on us financially, our assets are up about $600 million from where we were a year ago. And that's based on a couple things. 1, lending has slowed somewhat at our members. 2, we have an inverted yield curve, so more folks are holding cash. And we hope 3, we've been offering very competitive short-term rates for folks that aren't loaning the money at it. We really look at our average assets over a 12-month period because we have ebbs and flows. So we really focus, and all of our capital ratios are based on 12-month rolling assets. What's happening every month, we drop off 1 month from last year as we add a month from this year. And since our assets are up, our capital ratio, Tier 1 capital ratio, is actually inching down a little month to month just because our assets are going up. Our retained earnings ratio is continuing to go up because we're adding a lot of retained earnings. We are not actively going after or accumulating any additional member capital. We hit a milestone in July, 10 years ago at our annual meeting. I had the proud ability to announce we were 0 in retained earnings. Today, we are over 100 million. And you'll see I actually had to doctor one of the graphs to make sure that the graph showed we were above 100 million. But that's quite a milestone. It took us 30 years originally at First Carolina to get to 60. It took us 1 year to go from 60 back to 0. We are now above 102, and there's more good news hopefully to follow. We do have $214 million in member capital. This is permanent capital, and this is why we reinforce our core values and why we're in business to serve our members, is that we would not be here today if it wasn't for the money invested by our credit unions that believed in what we were trying to do with our cooperative model. We do have some NCA, but our total capital is $325 million. Regulatory capital, we back off. Tier 1 is basically our core capital, and that's really what we focus on. That's the member permanent capital and our retained earnings. From that, NCUA requires us to back off any investments we have in QSOs that aren't consolidated. When I talk about financials, it really includes Vizo Financial and MyCU, because we're 86% owners of MyCU, so all these figures include both. Those are consolidated. These QSOs are ones that aren't consolidated on our balance sheet. We have $6.5 million investments in those QSOs, all of which are doing well, but that's backed off so that our total regulatory capitals drops to $319 million. Retained earnings ratio is 263. If you looked at our, and you'll see a chart showing our Tier 1 ratio from a year ago. As long as a corporate's above 2.5% retained earnings ratio, we don't have to back off any of the member capital from our Tier 1 capital calculations. So we passed that threshold in, I think, February, which was kind of very nice. It jumped our Tier 1 capital ratio up by 1%. Leverage ratio, we're right at just below 8%. In total capital, we're above 8%. Probably more significantly, if you look at our risk-based capital, and that's looking, every asset we have is risk-weighted. We are at 27, basically 28%, showing a very high value in terms of our credit risk. Earnings this year were just about $10 million at the end of August, and which is just slightly above last year. You can see from total net income, we're almost $1.5 million up, but for the most part, that has been paid. We're paying out about $1 million more in our dividends on PCC. So we are very similar in terms of income and earnings. Here's just a snapshot. It looks a little out of proportion because 4.1 billion is not that much more than 3.9, but the graph makes it look like we're really growing, which is why we did it this way. But it's showing, we kind of estimated we'd be about 4 billion. We think we have the capacity in the future to grow to 5 billion, but that's really based on a member need and what we can provide to get it. Here's just a snapshot of where our Tier 1 ratio has gone. Back in 2016, the 496 has nothing to do with us losing capital. It was the change in how we calculated capital. And that was when we had to start deducting some of the member capital from our Tier 1 capital. We are no longer doing that, which is really why the capital ratio has jumped from 683 to 795. Given asset growth, I'm estimating by the end of the year, Tier 1 will be at probably about 780. So I expect us to keep dropping given assets. Total capital ratio is above 8%. We'll stay above 8%, but it probably will inch down as well due to assets. In terms of net income, one of the things we looked at when we merged was, can we be more efficient? Can we still be very competitive with pricing and add more to the bottom line, which clearly we have. I would think that we will end up closer to 2018 with our net margin, but these are historically very high for a corporate, probably over twice what we used to make pre-crisis. Here's the graph I wanted to show. I was so proud that we were over 100 million, but when I put in 102, how this graph looked, it still didn't hit the $100 million line. So I think I had to put in like 108 to get us above there. But so, I mean, just an indication of the doctoring we do here at Vizo Financial.
Total transparency.
Well, yeah, being totally transparent about that. So This is just a snapshot, not that we're going to quiz, just to show the credit quality. We have, over the year, our biggest asset class today is our SBA securities. These are 100% government guaranteed. They're also floating rate with no cap. We've drifted that for several reasons. One, the high credit value and the fact that they're floaters with no cap, but also because they are tied to prime versus LIBOR. We have kind of cut back on our asset-backed security portfolios somewhat. We've added to our U.S. government agencies, CMOs. LIBOR is supposed to go away at the end of 2021. That's an index that's used for basically trillions of dollars in securities, and there's no clear-cut change yet. Student loan asset-backed securities, which have very kind of old legacy paperwork, it was very unclear in those documents what would happen if LIBOR went away. So we anticipated that asset class becoming extremely illiquid. So we sold off almost the entire portfolio of that. So we've been very proactive, very happy what we've done with our portfolio. Our AA-rated corporate bonds are probably the lowest from a rating agency, but those are Toyota and what else do we have in there? Apple and Toyota, so we're quite confident that those are strong bonds. In fact, that portfolio of $61 million, if we sold today, would be over $1 million gain. Federal Reserve, $1.5 billion, that jumps around. This is just month end, so we usually target having at least $500 million in cash at the Fed, just so we can always have cash available for our members. We've been averaging through the year probably about $1 billion in cash. This is the highest we've had, though, in investments, which we're right about in terms of term type of investments, about $3 billion right now. And we're very proactive on how we manage that and feel very good. We did miss the mark a little. We thought rates were going to creep up a little more, and when fixed rates got to 4%, we were going to go in pretty heavy. And of course, we got to about 3.5%, and rates started going down, and I blame Fred for not changing that. We did buy some fixed, but the bulk of our balance sheet obviously is floating rate, so we never want to get locked in to a lot of fixed investments if the liability cost of funds keeps going up. Where we would invest long-term in fixed is in our capital book, which we have about $300 million. Although within the capital book, 2/3 of that is member money, which we obviously want to keep paying higher if rates keep going up. In terms of stabilization fund, I've been updating the group annually on what's going on with, this has to do with those of us who have been around for quite a while and lived through the corporate crisis. As you know, this year, NCUA gave a very small refund of about $160 million. Last year, about $736 million. And this goes back to the assessments that were done back in 2011, 2012, where they're about $4.8 billion. And this was to really cover the projected losses and cash flows necessary to hold all of the assets of the 5 corporates that were conserved back then. So there's still a net of about $3.9 billion. As we all know, NCUA did increase its operating reserve to 1.39. They backed off to 1.38. That was when they closed the stabilization fund last year. By my projections, given following how all these trusts are, each of the conserved corporates has a separate estate trust, and those assets, if there are excess funds, when all those assets are sold, those will be distributed. We think there could be about a $1.3 billion that should come back to credit unions through the assessments if NCUA does drop that operating reserve back to 1.3, and that could happen in a couple of years. Long and short of it, all of these actual outstanding assessments that won't get paid back will be a result of West Corps losses, which are well in excess of what their capital was. We're most interested in Vizo Financial. 10 years ago, we were 3 different corporates. So this is, we were Virginia corporate, First Carolina, and Mid-Atlantic. So we have certificates of capital we lost. at U.S. Central, and we've been monitoring U.S. Central. U.S. Central wrote off just under $2 billion. The PIC, the paid-in capital, $300 million, was the first member capital account to get hit. We don't project any of that coming back. Right now, on the bulk of that capital that was written off, about just under $1.7 billion, 88% is now projected to come back. What does that mean for Vizo Financial? It means we're 16% of any of this recovery. For us, that amounts to about $240 million. So what was a horror scene from 10 years ago, this is kind of an unexpected return of potential capital that we wrote off. Our plan, it would take for our members that recapitalized, you guys wrote off about $85 million. So the board, we've talked about it. We still have to wait till we get this money. But if the return is anywhere near the 240, probably the first thing we plan to do is pay back everyone who wrote off capital. We'd also probably pay a dividend on the PCC for the folks that invested in us. And we still think we'll be able to add about $140 million to retained earnings, which would put us in a capital position far greater than we ever thought we would have reached even prior to the crisis, because we wouldn't have built capital as quickly as we have. So that is good news. That's probably 2 years away from finding out. And so we'll have to see. There are still some hurdles. All of these assets have to be sold. And the last of them hopefully will be sold sometime in 2021. So we will see. In terms of our organizational focus, we've talked about in the past, we have 5 pillars that we've built expertise that we hope folks look to us for: money management, payments, people development, risk management, technology. And overall, that is really member engagement and relationships. And we had our recent planning session, and probably the biggest thing that sets us apart from other organizations is the fact that we really strive to have a close relationship with our members, and that we're responsive to your needs. And a lot more going forward, we're looking at trying to do partnerships and have credit unions more involved with initiatives that we're starting. So you help design what we're doing. Last slide for me is just our key initiatives right now, organizational structure changes. As I mentioned earlier, we own 86% of MyCU. Given kind of what we're trying to do as an organization, we have really collapsed the 2 organizations. We're now looking at positioning ourselves over the next 2 years when this potential refund occurs to be as efficient an organization as possible. So we're really looking at what we should be in terms of an organization and how we are most efficient. We've rolled back 2 QSOs since the merger back into the corporate. We are looking to buy back the 14% of ownership we do not have in MyCU. And that's primarily because a lot of the changes that we're looking at doing would potentially impact MyCU in terms of their earnings, and we didn't want to negatively impact the other owners while we were trying to work to make sure that we're as efficient as possible in how we structure our organization. So hopefully by the end of the year, we will own 100% of that organization, and you'll probably see in 2020 us shift some things around, pull quite a lot of things back into the corporate. A lot of the things that are in MyCU were done because 10 years ago, Mid-Atlantic didn't know whether Mid-Atlantic would survive, and there were a lot of important payment services that were moved to the QSO so that if the corporate did not survive, we could have continued serving the members who had all those services. Core processing, we own a core processor. We serve about 72 credit unions. We think it's a critical part of our future service blend, particularly for our smaller mid-sized credit unions, to try to wrap everything we do in a low-cost core. So we bought that, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago that MyCU bought that. We've kind of let it run on its own for quite a number of years. We've poured a lot more assets or resources towards developing there now because we think it's a critical thing for helping credit unions manage expenses and offer all of the robust payment services they need. P2P is something similar to a Venmo. We think it's important credit unions have a alternative in that space. We should have a product available through MyCU by the fourth quarter. Probably in the fourth quarter at best, we're going to be looking to find a number of credit unions to help pilot the program and give us input on how we change it. We'll be the first organization. The software is through Aptus, which is what we're using for our wires, our ACH. We will move our share draft platform there. And also our P2P will be through that. So we're kind of the guinea pigs in terms of figuring out what is the best process and how does that best serve our member needs. We should have all ACH on one platform by first quarter 2020, and then the biggest project to move to the platform is share drafts. International wires, we merged onto one platform this year. Managed IT is an area of growth, and this is, we know a lot of credit unions don't have a robust IT department, and we looked at could we help. We started dabbling in that. We've added more and more clients, so we are ramping up and looking to grow that to help credit unions. Affordable CECL solution. iCare solution is something that we have rolled out this year. That's in partnership with another corporate. We are using that service ourselves. It basically is a self-insurance for medical coverage. We still work through Capital Blue, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield, but all the payments are coming to Vizo Financial. We'll know at the end of the year whether that was a good financial move. We think it will be a very positive move over the long term in terms of helping credit unions control long-term costs of offering affordable health care to their employees. And last thing I'll mention is aggregation of pricing. One of the main reasons we kind of wanted to get back 100% ownership of MyCU, a lot of where we think we can deploy value to credit unions in the pricing area will be payments products. If we leave it in MyCU and we have other owners and we're basically discounting pricing there, that's impacting the return that they thought they were getting. So we thought it was really fairest to try to let them cash out of their investment before they are negatively impacted by decisions we make to drop pricing to the members. We are an aggregator, so the more you use us, the better it is for us. If you look at services like managed IT or ALM, we really are operating under a model where you're sharing an employee, so you don't have to hire an employee in-house. And I know it's worked extremely well in the ALM area. We'd like to kind of build the managed IT to be a similar and look to build other resources internally that can help you manage without hiring, and that we share the cost as a cooperative and as an aggregator. And with that, I will turn it over to my co-host, Jay Murray.
Well, in the 15 seconds that David's left for me, I'll just say the future's going to be not so easy, but we're working on it. Thank you. So, it's good to be with you today to talk a little bit about the future and some of the impacts that we believe technology's not only had so far, but yet to come, and some of the things that we're working on as it affects you as our members and what we're doing as a corporate, but also the effects for your members and their future and how it may impact all of us and some of the things that we may need to think about. So let me just start with how many of you have been around long enough to actually have written down member transactions in a ledger? So we have a few in the audience. How many of you have entered the credit union movement in the last 3 years? 5 years. So we got one. So some of us have been around long enough to see, as Jerry mentioned this morning, the mainframe and the 5 1/4 inch floppy. and the disk operating system that we had to boot up first to even get the computer to work. We've got to see all those things. In my nearly 36 years of being in this, and 28 of that with almost with the corporate next month, it's been quite a ride to watch just in 4 decades the amount of change that we've gone through. I want to talk about some of the impact points of that and kind of the future that we may see, and just grab really just 3 areas of technology, of work, and the future for your members and the future for us in financial services, just to throw some thoughts out there and give you some view of where we're trying to go and how we're thinking about it. As David concluded there about member engagement, one of the key parts to this discussion was we really need to be talking as the collective we, as a movement. I want to talk a little bit about how I think the cooperative thinking, the cooperative principles, how we need to embrace that more to fight the Goliath a little bit. Yesterday was mentioned and shared in our board meeting that Bank of America is going to spend about $10 billion on technology focused just on their application in the hands of customers. That's a lot of money. That's the kind of thing that we're up against. And kind of in that David and Goliath kind of thing, you have to collectively come together to fight the bigger point. As we think about technology and we see more of life integration of technology in our lives all the time, I think of my mother who's 86 with a pacemaker that is Wi-Fi, sending the signal off to the doctor, getting readings of that all the time. You think it's kind of that cyborgish thinking that we're integrating into technology. So that we've kind of reached that level. When I say the life form of artificial intelligence, it's that kind of thing where we're walking around with devices. It's kind of integrated into our lives as part of just sort of life and then a life form unto itself. But also we see a lot of life complexity reduction, right? We see a lot of easy things happening where we can just swipe over and something shipped to our house and lands on our doorstep and we've bought it. It's that easy. So a lot of change. When we think of the work, we're seeing more of the gig economy. And my time at the corporate, when I first came to the corporate, was the account rep and visiting all the credit unions, and most everybody had a single sponsor. Today, when we're collectively serving communities in a much broader way, we obviously see everybody's towns changing, that the factories were there, a lot of jobs changing, a lot of people working, especially in the IT world, seeing more of that where they're working on projects and maybe working for many companies, not just one. So a lot of that's changing. The life of revenue streams, which means your members will have maybe multiple revenue streams as they look forward in the future. And it's been a little uncertain for what that future may look like. As we think about the financial services side, obviously that technological integration's been key. If you're going to be valuable to your members, they want a lot of things to work well together. But this could affect the life changing of what the credit needs may be. Jerry mentioned that as we think about ALM. What could the future credit needs of members be with a different kind of life in the future? And also the relationship building is coming in a new way. So some of these points of impact, when you think about this with technology, as we think about that in integration, I think from a cooperative thing, we've got to think about mitigations by working to fund and support bigger efforts in technology for us to deliver that out through more credit unions, to keep everyone as a big group by and collectively being more competitive at street level to fight what the levels of Bank of America's may be doing. As we think about artificial intelligence and that growing from kind of the narrow artificial intelligence today to more general as it gets smarter, to the days when we may see more of a super intelligence of it getting smarter to actually act more on its own, which we don't know where that will go. But as we think about those things, it's going to take a lot of skill sets in the balance of our integration of technology and the skill sets of people working in credit unions along with technology and helping their members in that as well. Also, as we think of that life complexity reduction, your credit union is going to have to be easy to interact and integrate with everything going on in everyone's life. If you don't have those kind of integrations, a lot of people are going to look to not maybe use your applications if you don't assimilate well into everything else they do in life. So that's going to be important. as we do think about work, some of the predictions for the next 2 decades, even in the next 10 years, of the percentage of jobs that will be lost to automation, that will change because of data. Even in the credit union space, you can think of the kind of AI or the data integration of think about as a loan officer. If the machine can really predict and analyze itself and give the decision, how much does a loan officer have to do, right? Even those kind of effects on jobs. But call center jobs, but even for the rest of the economy out there, a lot of jobs changing with robotics and a lot of automation. Again, those revenue streams for your members may come from more than one source. They may not just have one job. They may be working for multiple companies, multiple projects. So it's something, as these things shift, how you think about lending, credit, what they're going to be able to make in revenue and deposit could all change and shift. We got to think about, too, if in the next 20 years we're going towards autonomous cars, obviously those kind of things. Are people buying cars? We're already seeing some of that in the sharing economy now, where some kids, as they move to the cities, just don't even own cars. You rent on demand, right? We think differently about that. And a bit of the life of the uncertain future. We got to make it easy to interact with the credit union, but I also think to help people become financially healthier and wealthier, this is the collective we've got to see as a movement, that helping people save more for retirement, which we know is a problem now. And we're looking at statistics where those that are 55 and older today, 26% of those or so have no 401k and no pension. And we've got other generations that I don't even think realize how much money they're going to need to ever call retirement, whatever that is. So that's another element of we're going to have members that aren't retiring the way things have happened in the past that we have to think about. So as financial services, I think as we think of that integration technology, we have to drive to change and also work that we get on platforms to integrate our technologies, to make it easy to use and deliver easy to the members. And as the world of work turns, the credit wants and needs, we've got to address the effects of the balance sheet of what will likely happen. Deposit flows and cash flows could definitely change. But also, I put here, the membership has left the building. They're mobile. That's changing. And as the generations continue to move, my mother still wants to go in and talk to somebody every time she does a transaction, and others, really just don't ever go in and just use the phone, right, or call. So things are definitely changing. We've got to think about how we do that. And we also have to think about the impacts. Here we are at a financial conference. Think about the future and the impacts to the balance sheet that could happen, the flow of deposits, if people are working differently, making money differently. All of that isn't as sure as we may see some of that today, that we have to think about that in the money flow, the credit demand flow, the revenue sources, how people make money could be shifting and how they're coming in, which could affect how we're processing payments, how we're helping them advance money. We see everything from crowdfunding, which I find kind of funny. Aren't credit unions the greatest crowdfunders we've ever had? But we don't call it that. But we are pooling our money together to help people. But how people and revenue flows soar, we got to really think about. Skilled staff is absolutely critical. As David mentioned, we're working hard to keep building up our knowledge base and be deep partners with you in your aggregating the collective mind power that you help the corporate purchase and engage in employment to work for you. So that's critical, and we want to make sure that we continue to do that, and then also help train up your staff as well. Also, all the smart technology has to integrate well, or we're not going to see, if it doesn't integrate well, I think your balance sheet will shift because you won't be as attractive. And that's something we got to work hard on, because really technology is going to drive a lot of that. And again, I think how you're building relationships now and in the future continues to change. More outreach, reaching people differently, both face-to-face and through technology. We've got to find more ways to collectively build community in a new way through technology and build that relationship between the credit union and the member. And with that, too, as we think about this in the coming years, we're really making a lot of investments around technology. As David mentioned, the core processing system, our global goal to that has been to be as much of an integrated back end helping reduce the costs. We have some of the credit unions that are aligning all of them, amassing their back offices together to scale up. Jerry mentioned in his talk about efficiency ratios, trying to build greater efficiency to keep those margins high enough to stay competitive. And we talk about that in terms of keeping the credit union promise, where rates are still better than the competitors, the loan rates are lower, and the fees are lower. If we're going to keep the credit union promise of what the not-for-profit cooperative movement would be, we've got to work hard on those efficiencies, and a lot of that's driven around technology and payments in building the balance sheet up for that. We're trying to do that to pay you well and make sure we're as efficient as a collective aggregator to pump as much returns to you, but also in the back office, we're trying to buy you time where you're taking out some of the commoditization of the day-to-day stuff and focusing more on all front-facing member efforts so that you're getting the most time on the street with your members and less time worrying about compliance and CECL and ALM and all the other stuff that you've collectively purchased in the corporate for us to do for you. So that's what we're trying to do and have highly skilled staff to help you do that. Again, we want to tune into your realities of what's happening on the retail side so that we're deeply understanding that better. Not all of us, David and I and a few others, have worked on the retail side of credit unions and banking. Not all of our staff has done that. A lot of them have been in the ops side of the back office. So we want to learn more about what some of the things you're seeing and facing to help us better design what we do. And we're also working with other corporate credit unions, trying to do something more on a national scale, faster payments, getting all of us amassed in the same rails. When you look across all of the top corporates, we're one of the largest payments processors in the country combined. So we're trying to do a lot to help bring efficiencies there. Lastly, as David said, this commitment has been building our culture on the team focused as a unified team, trying to continue to learn and get smarter, because we believe the only way we'll be successful and help you drive forward is for us to keep each day continuing to learn, be smart about what we do. But I think too, collectively, I would just say to you, as credit unions, we really need a great time. It's a great time now to really be thinking about the cooperative principles, the collective we. I always point to number 6 is, we cooperate at a local level, a state level, a national level, and international level, because I do believe that cooperative power is our way to mitigate against these big things we need to overcome. We need to come together, bring our mindsets, bring all of our mind power together to think, where do we need to go next and make smart moves to make us leap forward in the U.S. as a powerful force to help keeping people financially healthier and wealthier in your members. With that, I thank you very much, and I want to thank our board for all the support they give, our management team, and all of our staff. They represent you well. They really do. They care. They want to see us successful. They've helped us through, many jaunts through the years of getting us to today. And we're very happy to say it's been a successful run of this merger to get us here. It's given us power to be one of the best and top corporates, and that's our goal, to be that in the U.S., to do well for you and perform well. Thank our staff for all of their commitment to uphold these principles every day and do that. But most of all, we thank you for all of your support to help us do this, to come together, to make us a great aggregated power for you, and we thank you for all the support you give us. We hope you'll continue to engage with us, and you'll see us out a lot more sitting down with you to have this conversation. So thanks so much. With that, give the meeting back to Jim.
I think from those two speeches, you get a sense of why this merger has worked out so well. David is very focused on the financial side of the balance sheet, and Jay is very future-focused, strategic, and that has served all of us well. So, David and Jay, thank you very much. Just if you could, a round of applause. You did a great job. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's any old business to be presented, as I am not aware of any. Hearing none, okay. Are there any new business items to be presented? Again, I'm not aware of any. Okay, great, thank you. Next, I'd like to ask Bob Bruns to take the podium to present the nominating committee report.
Welcome to Charlotte. Thank you, Jim. Between David and Jay, I think we have 1 minute left, so I'll be brief. We're okay?
We're way over.
Okay. The members of the 2019 nominating committee are Sue DeStefano, First Capital Federal Credit Union, Patty Idle, Mountain Credit Union, and myself, Bob Bruns, from Charlotte Metro Federal Credit Union as chair. The nominating committee met in accordance to our bylaws, and the following candidates for 2019 election were selected. Daniel Berry, Duke University Federal Credit Union in Durham, North Carolina. Jeff Chelius, Riverfront Federal Credit Union in Reading, Pennsylvania. Janice DeCorte, Health Share Credit Union, Greensboro, North Carolina. Allison DeTonk, University of Virginia Community Credit Union in Charlottesville, Virginia. Lisa Lambrick, Valley Star Credit Union in Martinsville, Virginia. Scott Woods, South Carolina Federal Credit Union in North Charleston, South Carolina. No recommendations for nomination were rejected, and no nominations for petition were received. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. This year, the board election was conducted via online platform hosted by Survey and Ballot Systems to make participating in the election even easier for our members. We had 221 total ballots cast, which was just below our voting total of 235 ballots from last year, and received several positive comments on the ease of use and the efficiency of this new format. We hope to see more members engage in the online election next year. The election results were compiled by Survey and Ballot Systems. The nominees elected for a 3-year term, which expire in 2022, are Scott Woods from South Carolina Federal Credit Union, Allison DeTonk from University of Virginia Community Credit Union, and Jeff Chelius from Riverfront Federal Credit Union. The nominee elected for a 2-year term, which expires in 2021, is Daniel Berry from Duke University Federal Credit Union. Congratulations to our newly elected directors. At this time, I'll discharge the nominating committee. Thank you for your work during the 2019 nomination process. Next, I'd like to recognize one of our board members who is retiring from the Vizo Financial Board. We are fortunate to have had Brian Vidic on the Vizo Financial Board, someone who is willing to share his time and expertise and who provided great leadership on behalf of the corporate credit union system. Brian, would you please join me at the podium? So on behalf of the board here, Brian, we have a commemorative plaque and we have a resolution. Really appreciate all that you've done for the corporate. For me personally, you're a great person, a great friend. I value our relationship.
Thank you, Jim.
So since we're already negative time, and my chair said, don't ever give Brian a microphone, just a couple of things real quick. 17 years ago, I was approached by our corporate account manager, Cheryl Halls, to consider serving on the supervisory committee for Mid-Atlantic. And said, absolutely, just kind of came into myself as a new CEO. So I met the former CEO, Ed Fox, and Cheryl and Jay at a local restaurant. And a little intimidating, Ed kind of has a bigger-than-life demeanor about him, those of you that remember or know Ed Fox. So as soon as Ed started the meeting, he started with his jokes, and I'm like, I'm in. So then as I progressed through that, quickly moved on to the board. But you know, I want to advocate for the corporate just for a second as a member and also as a director. Always use the corporate first. I mean, when you go to market for services or products or whatever it is, you know, Rodney May is probably the biggest cheerleader for the corporate in the way that everybody should go to the corporate first. And it's been a great journey, made a lot of good friends. I've had the time of my life. You guys have all made me a better manager at my credit union, and I have been successful, and I'm standing in front of you today because of the corporate. It's because of Jay's vision to save small credit unions. And I'm one of the 6 pioneer founding credit unions that have formed Archego Big with Joe and Jim, Joan, and it just has been an amazing journey. And this is an amazing industry. And I'm so glad 29 years later that this is what I picked as my career. So I couldn't have met a nicer group of people. It was important to me to see the merger through. It's time to bring new blood into the corporate, and so for that, I'm happy. I'm happy to pass the baton. So thank you, Jay. Thank you, David.
And for those of you, you may have seen Brian's credit union, Destination Credit Union, just implemented a program called Operation Hope. He's the first credit union in the country to offer that, to try and provide services to his low-income membership. And I kudos to you, Brian. Awesome. And thank you, Eva, for sharing Brian with us these past so many years. Greatly appreciate it. At the conclusion of the 2019 annual meeting, Brian will be retiring from the Vizo Financial Board of Directors. Brian has been an active and dedicated credit union leader for over 29 years. Brian was appointed to the Mid-Atlantic Federal Credit Union Supervisory Committee in 2002 and served as Supervisory Committee Chair from 2005 to 2007. He was then appointed to the Mid-Atlantic Board of Directors in 2005 and elected to the board in 2006, serving as Secretary from 2007 to 2016. Brian actively participated in and became part of the newly created Vizo Financial Corporate Credit Union Board of Directors in 2016 and became chair of the Enterprise Risk Management Committee in 2018. Brian also serves on the MyCU Services Board of Directors. Mid-Atlantic and Vizo Financial have both benefited from his leadership during one of the most critical times for this nation's financial industry, and culminating in the successful merger of First Carolina Corporate Credit Union and Mid-Atlantic Corporate and beyond. Brian is highly respected for his leadership, dedication, and integrity over his many years of service to the credit union community. Brian, we thank you for your dedication, integrity, leadership provided to the credit union movement. Again, thank you, Brian. There being no further agenda items to address, can I have a motion to adjourn the 2019 annual business meeting of Vizo Financial Corporate Credit Union? Remember to please state your name as well. Can I get a motion? Motion. Thank Allison DeTunk. Second, please. Second, Joe Moran. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful day.